Good evening, y'all. My name is Gabe. I'm a grateful, recovered alcoholic and addict.
Hey.
Sobriety date's June 3rd, 2014. For that, I'm extremely grateful. And that was the worst and best day of my life. Thank you, Lennon, for inviting me. Thanks, James, who's not with us, but spiritually. And thanks to all of y'all. I'm so blessed to be here and be of service. This is an absolute blessing to me. I don't deserve to be here. I think God deserves got nothing to do with it. But if I got what I deserved, I'd be a whole lot of other places. And who made the squash casserole?
Hey.
Fantastic. Hats off to you, sir. That was delicious. In fact, all the food was really, really good. So thank y'all all. And the spaghetti casserole was spaghetti casserole. So it's family night. And I was thinking about the importance of my family to me. And as all of y'all are, I'm sure, way too familiar as to how this disease utterly destroys our families. It's incomprehensible. The things that I did to my family are almost inexpressible. I'm going to do my best up here, but it's one of the reasons why I love the doctor's opinions so much. My dad's a doctor, and I think he kind of came at it from a secular position. My mother has alcoholism strewn throughout her family. Okay, my grandfather drank himself to death. Literally drank himself to death at the age of 66. I was 10 years old. We had hospice called in, and the guy, he was healthy otherwise, but his liver just quit. And they would take his keys away from him, and he would call a cab. He found a way, as we all do, as we were talking about earlier. We're going to find a way to get our fix. And he was no exception. He did. And I was 10 years old, watch hospice come in, watch him emaciate, and watch him take his last breath. And the bottle killed him. Both of his sons, my uncles, are recovered alcoholic addict, 38, 39 years sobriety. They got sober at Preston Group in Dallas, Texas. Both of them a year apart from each other. So it's got a long history of this. It's genetic, guys. It's spiritual. It's genetic. It runs in our families. If you shake our family trees, a few of us are going to fall out of it. And it's no one's fault. It's who we are. And I had to come to terms with that because I was in control, and I wasn't going to be an alcoholic for 30 years of my life. That was just the way it was. I was going to be a normal drinker, and I was just going to keep cleaning up my messes and manipulating people to clean up my messes as I went along so I could live the lifestyle that I wanted to live and live in this misery that I was living in. And, it gets to the point to where you get introduced to those four horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. And I came to understand a loneliness that you do. And I know that loneliness is felt in this room. I'm sure everyone in here has felt that. And we share that. We are like passengers on a ship liner that's sinking. We are exactly that. And this is my family. It is. AA is the spiritual family that stood behind me in the darkest times of my life and saved my life. God used this program to save my life. And it's a blessing. It's because it's who defines me today. And then the doctor's opinion, he goes through these elements. This was a secular doctor. Dr. Silkworth was just working with alcoholics. And, it's beautiful. He's sitting there from a secular position talking about how nuts we are. And that he tried everything. His whole team tried everything. The families and friends tried everything. These are the doctors at the preeminent stages of the profession, and they couldn't cure us. But God, right? He's like, but there's these spiritual principles that came in, and it is the only thing that we see that works. And this psychic change happens. And when the psychic change happens, that person who was once doomed, all of a sudden there's hope. And they hadn't seen anything like it. It is an absolute testimony to God. And it says in this book, in the doctor's opinion, that the message, which is to interest and hold these alcoholic types, must have depth and weight. It must. Or we will die. We will perish. And I honestly, fundamentally believe in my heart that we are all called to carry that message. I think we're called to do entirely more than that as well. I think everyone in this room is called. And people ask me, what was your spiritual awakening? spiritual awakening? It's the day that I woke up and realized that this wasn't a curse, it was a blessing. And I'm blessed for who I am today. And I'm blessed that this disease brought me into a relationship with God that allowed me to have a relationship with my family, that allowed me to have a relationship with you and so many other people that is meaningful today, that gives me purpose in my life. I was born and raised in San Angelo, and I love my family to death. My dad and I didn't see eye to eye, still don't sometimes. I love him. He did the best he could. He took care of me. Doctor, always provided support for our family. We definitely butted heads. But I love my family, and I want y'all to know that. I love my mother. I was a mama's boy growing up. We were in an airplane crash when I was 14 years old, and my mom broke her back. Both my parents broke their backs. My dad caught on fire in the airplane, and I pulled my mom out. It's what happens when you're in a crisis like that. And I'm going to tell you, I had never been to church. I hadn't been to AA. I hadn't been to any kind of spiritual program in my life up to that point. My family was entirely secular, and I prayed to God when that plane was crashing. I did. And I said, I will be yours if you just get us out of this deal. I made a commitment. And about a month later, maybe right under a month, first time I really started drinking. And I was 13, not 14. It was 1996. But I started drinking, and then 14 was when we were drinking every weekend. I was in 9th grade. There's a liquor cabinet right next to my bedroom, and me and my friends, we would slumber party over there, and we'd go in there. There was countless numbers of vodka bottles down there, and we would just fill them up with water, and there was 3 other bars upstairs, so, that no one noticed the damage that was being done downstairs. And so that's what we did. And I immediately realized when I took that drink, so I'd been picked on by my friends. I was always smaller. I was a Texas Tech fan. They were all UT fans and A&M fans. But after the airplane crash, something happened, and I kind of had this status of heroic figure. It started to change my life. And then when I started drinking, and I know all of y'all know this feeling, I'd arrived. I'd found it. And I could outdrink my friends who were bigger than me. Now, they would later get sober too, but there's a whole lot of my friends have built. But, I found something that I was good at, and I was better than everybody else. And that was alcohol. That was drinking. And so we did that. And we drank, and I drank every night of my life, every day of my life going forward. Maybe not every night at that time, but every weekend. And then in high school, my thing was I was always making my grades. I was always at the top of my class. And man, I could run this thing, and I could manipulate my way out of trouble every single time. I received multiple MIPs when I was underage, PIs. I was arrested using fake IDs and lying. And at the same time, I'm being elected to go to Washington, D.C. for leadership conferences. I got so drunk at prom when I was 18, my senior year. It's my introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous. I decided I'm in a blackout drunk, and I decided I'm going to cuss out the ceiling, because the ceiling is clearly aggrieved to me somehow. And so I'm cussing out the ceiling, and I fell down the flight of stairs in front of the cops and the teachers and everybody else, and the cops are trying to arrest me. My friends are chasing me. The principal, who I was an aide for, the head principal of our school, took me outside, and I proceeded to stop traffic in downtown San Angelo. And while people are getting out of their cars and screaming at me to move, I'm telling them that this is the greatest effing principal that has ever walked the planet. And she's like, yeah, well, you're not going to like me so much tomorrow. And so I created such a scene there that I had to go to some sort of alternative schooling. It was either go to Carver, but we were about to walk the stage. I was a senior. And if I went to Carver for 40 days, I wouldn't have walked the stage with my classmates. So we decided that I was going to go to La Hacienda instead. 40 consecutive days, still met the statute, still met the requirements. Everything was going to be good, right? So I go down there, and there's this guy with a patch over his eye, and he's screaming at me. And I'm wondering why this man is screaming at me. And in God's infinite wisdom and humor, that man is now my grand sponsor, Chris Raymer. And I'm going to tell you this, guys. When that man was yelling in that bodega, I knew in my heart what he was yelling was the truth. I knew at 18 years old. I knew that I couldn't stop drinking. And I wasn't able to accept that. But I knew what this man was saying was the God's honest truth. And there was a part of me that hoped that what he was trying to peddle to me was also true, that there was hope. Because I knew that one day there was going to be a reckoning. I knew one day I was going to have to come to terms with my mortality and face it. But it wasn't going to be that day. And so I got out and I went back to San Angelo and immediately got loaded. And I stayed loaded. And instead, I made the decision, the conscious decision, because I figured if I went to Texas Tech where my parents wanted me to go, I'd probably die or at least spend 10 years in college. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go. So I've got a quasi-godfather. He's not spiritual, but just kind of who would have been there in case my family had passed away. He's an attorney in San Angelo. Doesn't have kids. Him and his wife haven't had kids. I'm kind of their surrogate child in a way. And he had gone to a military college called the Citadel. And he's important to this story. And so I ended up following kind of in his footsteps. He's an attorney, so I was like, I'm going to go to the Citadel. Like, they're going to have some structure there, all right? Like, I can, like, drink part-time. I can get, like, loaded part-time and, like, do the military thing part-time. Then I'll join the military, and I'll just stay. This was my thing. I'm just going to stay in this structured environment. Like, I'm going to let the structure, I'm going to put structure around me, okay? Because I know I'm volatile. And so I'm going to build in as much structure into my life, and that's going to stabilize everything I'm doing. So that's what I did. And I was leadership roles there. I was academic officer, ended up running our company, battalion board of visitors rep and honor rep and all these things. And still getting arrested, still getting DWIs, still causing scenes, still cussing out the tactical officer and blackout drunks and falling down the stairs and cracking my head open and pulling cops' guns out of their holsters and trying to stab myself in the neck with pins. Still doing all this stuff, causing gigantic scenes, and I'm talking my way out of all this stuff with no repercussions. And I'm still leadership role. I don't like, it blows my mind, but y'all understand. And so I graduate somehow, and I stayed in Charleston for a year, and I knew I wanted to go to law school. And so I went to law school at St. Mary's in San Antonio, and that was a complete blackout drunk and high. And I met a girl there, and we lived together for 2 years, and good girl. My alcoholism was insane at that time. I was drinking morning to night. I would be in the law library, and people would be like, dude, have you been drinking? And I'm like, yeah. Like, it's 7 in the morning. Of course I've been drinking. Like, there's a bottle of scotch in my car. You don't do this? And so that was my life. And I used speed to stay awake throughout the day. And this was my life. And I did it. And I did it every single day. And got arrested. Got out of it. This crazy cycle is continuing. I graduate law school. My fiance left me the day we graduated. And because of my drinking. And she left. And I tried to drink myself into oblivion. And I ended up moving back to San Angelo, Texas. And my friends that were banging heroin and methamphetamines at the time decided that the guy that was drinking needed to go to treatment. So that's any indication to how much I was drinking. It was a lot. And so they took me to the bar before we went. And so we're going to go to Abilene for detox. And it's 9 in the morning, so we had to find a bar that was open in San Angelo. And I took like 30 somewhat shots. We don't know. And then I drank a bottle of Crown Royal on the way down there. And I mean, this was nothing new to these guys, so they didn't realize how much I drank, but I was like on a mission, right? And so I ended up at the detox center, and I stopped breathing. And luckily the charge nurse recognized it, and they called an ambulance and intubated me, and I ended up in ICU with a .556 BAC. And the only reason why I survived was because my tolerance was that high. And they were like, look, if you want to try that again, you may not survive. And I did. I tried. I would find my way into multiple ERs and ICUs after that. Went to treatment, met a girl in treatment, because that's what you're supposed to do. That's how you work the program. And she got out before I did, so she came and she picked me up. And so she picked me up and we left, and I do not advise this at all. And I'll tell you what. So we immediately relapsed. And she went back to Kerrville, where she was from, and I went to a Celebrate Recovery meeting with my brother-in-law while I was drinking. And I left there and turned the wrong way down 87 and immediately got arrested for DWI. Manipulated my way out of jail, bonded my way out, and immediately got rearrested. for DWI the next night. Got my way out of there again and made it to my parents' ranch and got into a fight with my parents because they didn't want me there, and they had me arrested for assault and family violence. So that's 3 times in a row. And then I got out, and they just had me locked back up because they decided to, and had talked to the judges, and they just decided I was a hazard to society at that time. So I went and I did 9 months at what's CRTC SATF, if any of y'all are familiar with that. And so I spent 9 months of my life there and got out and manipulated my way through that program too. Told them, I don't even need to do the aftercare, I'm cured. And I'm such a swell guy and I'm so unique that I'm just going to move to Austin and I'm going to go study for the bar exam because I've got this law degree and I still haven't taken the bar exam, and y'all are just going to let me do that. And they did. And I went down there to Austin and I started working at the state capitol where I worked before law school, and I was not staying sober. Went to a strip club because I figured I could go to the strip club and just drink tonic water because this isn't insane at all. And so I go there and I'm like, this is great because I could still live the life I was living and just drink tonic water. And so I met this girl who I knew from Charleston who worked there, and she ended up moving in with me, which was probably a really horrible, bad idea looking back on it. And then she moved a bunch of her friends from the strip club in, and so then I actually did have a sponsor who was working at the Attorney General's office at the time. And he's like, you're running a brothel and you're within 1,000 feet of a school zone, so you're probably going to have the SWAT team raid you if you don't do something pretty quick. So I was like, yikes. So I kicked them all out. And when I kicked them all out, she called the police and told the police that I was suicidal, and there was a gun. It's a long story, not my gun, it was my old roommate's gun, and it wasn't a locked gun case, there was no ammunition. All my guns were in Texas. One of her friends had overheard me say I wanted to kill myself, which was true, but I was just drunk. Right? But all this got reported to the police, and as the police are coming out there and she says I'm held up in there with a gun, some yahoo shoots off a couple of rounds in my neighborhood, so that looks bad. So they show up with the cavalry and a couple of SWAT teams and a bomb squad, and so they come over the intercom with talking about me, and I was on bond for DWI, and so I'm like, oh, she called the police and told them I was drinking. So I'm like, I'm not going to go out there and incriminate myself, so I just closed the blinds. Like, I was wondering why there were 3 cop cars lined up in my cul-de-sac. Like, that's weird. But like for, a go-off bond. But, I'm like, I'm not going to go out there and find out. So I'm like, I'm just going to grab my 2 handles of whiskey and I'm just going to go into my bedroom and I'm going to lock the doors. And I finished my 2 handles of whiskey. My 2 dogs are with me, and I passed out. I had zero idea that there was a full-blown standoff going on in my front yard. That all my friends from Austin were out there. My parents are driving down. They've evacuated the cul-de-sac. And I wake up about 9 hours later, 8 or 9 hours later, and there's a robot next to my bed. And there's the smell of C4 in the air. And the robot's talking to me. And it's telling me to come out with my hands in the air. And I'm like, what year is it? First of all, what is it? Why is R2-D2 next to me? And I'm like, okay, well, this has clearly gotten out of control. So like, I'm trying to come out. I'm trying to comply at this time. I'm coming out with my hands in the air, but I'm too drunk, so I pass out on the couch, and that's when they hit me from both sides with the SWAT teams and dragged me outside. Didn't break the law, theoretically. I wasn't charged with anything because there was this big misunderstanding. But they were like, look, maybe we overused some force. We're just going to not write in there that you were drinking because we're on bond for this deal. And I kept my job at the Capitol, and talk about a mess. And so then I decided to move to East Old Torf because I was persona non grata at that neighborhood after that happened. And tried to do me some controlled cocaine smoking. And that didn't end well really either. And so I'm on probation for that said DWI at that time. And I'm a mess. And I blew numbers in the courtroom with my judge who's in the program. And she loved me. And she was like, Gabe, we just want you to get sober, man. And she's like, I want to breathalyze you. And I blew a .17 in her courtroom. And she let me walk out of there. I was working for her best friend who was a state senator, and they went to law school together. And I still manipulated my way out of that and walked out of there. And now I lost my job, and she issued a warrant for my arrest, and I spent 3 months in Travis County Correctional Complex. And when I got out, I turned 30 in there, and I got out, and I decided I was going to go to any lengths necessary. So I got out, and I met San Angelo Solution Group. We actually formed San Angelo Solution Group. It's my home group now. And these guys were like, bro, you are beyond human aid. We promise. Ain't nothing we can do. You need God, and bad. And so I was like, I tend to agree with you. This is getting kind of ugly. And I was tired. I was really getting tired. And I got 9 months of sobriety at that time. I had a spiritual experience coming back to Austin. I was diagnosed bipolar, major depressive disorder, all kinds of different things. I'm medicated for lefters, righters, uppers, downers, and all this stuff, right? For me, it was untreated alcoholism. By the grace of God, I'm not on any of those medications today. I got 9 months of sobriety, and during that time, I met this girl who was cutting my hair. And I fell in love. And she was 13 years older than me, and it was great. And I was infatuated. And all of a sudden, guys, you know that cliche they say, don't get into a relationship a year into sobriety? I always thought that was a cliche. Now, I know people have done it successfully by the grace of God, but for me, it was not the case. I immediately put that person where God was supposed to go. All I did was cross-addict. That person became God. And then I slowly stopped working with my sponsees, and they stopped becoming less important, and everything became about this girl. Every single thing became about this person. And when we had a fight, I had a bad day. Everything was related to her. And what I started to realize was, I'll get to that in a second. But we got into a huge fight, and I stopped growing spiritually. Completely. And I decided to go back to what I knew would make this stop hurting. And so I got loaded. She kicked me out of her house, and I went to my parents' ranch where I was living at the time. And I was in a complete blackout drunk, and I had enough alcohol to kill myself, and my family knew it. My mom and dad were living in New Mexico at the time, and my mom drove down from New Mexico. And she came in, she met Tip, the attorney, and they were going to remove me from the household. And they came inside, and there was a fist fight inside. And when the fist fight was over, I grabbed an AR-15 that was always sitting on my front door, and I followed them outside. And we were in a carport, and I discharged about 30 rounds in front of them on the ground when they were walking at me. And the only thing that I vaguely kind of remember was pointing the gun at his head when he was screaming, "Do you realize what you have done?" And I shot her in the femoral artery, and I shot him in the top of the foot. And my mom's on the ground. She's bleeding out. She's dying. And all the fun and games and all the manipulations and everything else came crashing down. My mom's on the ground dying, and this is a person that I love to death. And now I think I've killed her. So I grabbed the AR-15 and I threw it into the field, and I got Tip up and I begged him, "Can you save my mom's life?" And he said, "I don't know. And he took his tie off and he put a tourniquet around her leg. And they got her to Shannon, where they operated on her for 9 hours. She's alive. I just had dinner with her last night, by the grace of God, but I didn't know that at the time. She was dying. They sent the cavalry to the ranch. I thought I'd killed my mother, so I grabbed a 12-gauge shotgun and I walked outside, and I'm waving it around at these cops trying to get them to shoot. My current sponsor, Jerry Green, was there, and my current boss, who was my sponsor at the time, were both out there, and they were begging these people not to kill me. They were begging them not to. By the grace of God today, that SWAT team, I'm in a Bible study with 3 of them, and one of them is my best friend today. And they didn't kill me, and they should have. They have killed for less, and it is absolutely by the grace of God that they didn't. And I'm waving this shotgun at them, and I said horrible, horrible things to them. And they didn't kill me. Instead, they went and got a tank from Abilene, Texas, and they brought it down. They threw in tear gas. And when they were throwing in tear gas, I couldn't breathe, so I had to make a decision. And I'm trying to figure out how to blow my brains out. And I've got the 12 gauge in my mouth, and I'm trying to figure out how to do it with my thumb or with my toe, because you don't want to mess this up. And something in my head told me, a historical reference came to my mind, but it said, "You're not crazy like that, but you're real sick." And I got on my knees and I prayed. And I couldn't breathe, and I walked outside. And I spent the next 4.5 years of my life in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. And the girl that I was in a relationship with stayed with me in a relationship for 1.5 years. And I talked to her every single morning, and I talked to her every single night. And it became part of my disease. She was my rock. She became my God. And God saw fit 1.5 years into my incarceration to shoot me to Beaumont, Texas, and he delivered me from that. Not that she was a bad person. I'm not saying that. Because with her in my life, I was cut off from the sunlight of the school. And when I got moved out there and I had to do a minimum of 4 years on my charge before I would even come up for parole, she met somebody and it destroyed me. It absolutely destroyed me. And my world came crashing down as she told me over the phone, I can't talk to you in the mornings anymore. And I knew there was somebody, right? And why would this person betray me? Why would this person forsake me? She's my God. That's how I felt. And she was pulling away and she was ripping away. And I'm screaming like a lunatic behind barbed wire fences and concrete, 8.5 hours away trying to control somebody. And I'm screaming and I hang up, I slam this phone, and these two cats behind me say, hey brother, come sit down with us. You need some freedom because you ain't got none. You're all tied up on that phone. And these two guys are two of my friends today, solid members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and two of the most spiritual men I've ever met in my life. And I want to rewind a little bit to the day after that I got thrown in jail. I was sitting in holding by myself, and I'd gone completely insane, and there was nothing. It was just me, and I'm trying to find a way to like hang myself. I was off my medication, and everything was just crashing down, and I felt like there was no relationship with God. I felt forsaken and alone and completely cut off from Him. And they came to me and they said, hey, there's two people here to see you. There's two attorneys here. And I walked out there, and there was two attorneys from St. Angelo Solutions. Well, one attorney from St. Angelo Solutions Group and another man that's in the familiar for bills. And they were sitting there, and it was God had thrown me a lifeline. Those guys were just there to tell me that they loved me, and that they were behind me, and that I wasn't Satan. I wasn't the most evil thing that had ever happened. And that saved my life, guys. That is what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is. In a vision for you, we talk about that. Is there a substitute for alcohol? Oh yeah, and it's so much more than that. It is being the hands and feet of God. And those guys showed up and they saved my life. That was the first thing that happened that showed me that God still loved me. And so I meet these guys that are sitting behind me a year and a half into the penitentiary, and I started doing everything they said. And they said, when you get that letter next week, you're going to get a letter and it's going to say, don't ever contact me again. Don't ever contact her again. And I listened to exactly what they said. And then they said, now you're going to have to work these steps. And when we got to that point, and I'll tell you about working those steps, because I'd worked those steps 1,000 times. I had been to treatments. I'd been to 7 treatments. I had done my 5th step with people. I'd done 4 steps, and it was this exercise in futility. Just writing stuff out. But it all wasn't wasted time. There were seeds being planted, and I didn't even know it. And I'm sitting there, and I'm going to tell you my step 1 experience this time was just a little bit different. It says in this book, when we became alcoholics, faced with a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that God is either everything or else He is nothing. He either is or He isn't. And I was at a place in my life where I was so alone and so gone, and I hated myself so much that the only people that loved me were people in Alcoholics Anonymous in the penitentiary. And they were just 2 tassels, and I grabbed a hold of them like the desperation of a drowning man. That is where I saw rock bottom for me was the most horrible, lonely, painful, and beautiful place I've ever been in my entire life, because it was finally the place where I could see the false for the false and the truth for the truth. I could see it for what it was, and I could see me in it, and I knew that there was a way out, and I knew I fundamentally believed God existed. And that God sent these 2 people because they were speaking my language. And they said, God loves you and we're going to show you a way out of this. And God's got you here for a reason. And I did everything these guys said. That was my step 1 experience. Burn the ships. I didn't want to have anything left to do with Gabe, because what I thought was good wasn't. I realized that everything in every situation and every human being that I came into contact with was designed for me to manipulate, to fill this insecurity with, to give me worth. That's what that girl was doing, and I didn't love her. I was infatuated with her. I loved the idea of it because she made me feel whole. She made me feel like somebody, because I was dying inside, because the day that Chris Raymer said that you can't control this, it's going to control you, and you have to surrender, I knew he was right. And from that day, that fear set in, because I knew Everything I was doing was false. It says we want to enjoy a certain reputation, and deep down inside we know we don't. And I knew I didn't. And it tore me apart every single day of my life as I walked through this life, because I was this actor on a stage presenting this stage character. So all of y'all believed that I had it together, and deep down inside I knew nothing was being held together. I was holding it together with the military and with other people and manipulation and money and all these things, and I'm holding on to it, and it was just a house of cards. And I knew that deep down inside of my heart. For years it had torn me apart. And I hated who I'd become. I was like Smeagol in Lord of the Rings. I hated everything, and I was ugly inside and outside. And I used my parents, and I abused them, and now I've nearly killed my mother. I nearly caused a divorce in their family. All I did was manipulate, harm, and take from people. And these guys taught me the difference. Today, you're not going to take anymore. Today, you're going to start giving. You're going to work this program. You're going to believe that God exists. Do you not? And I said, yeah, I've tried everything else. I've tried everything else. I've checked every other box. And get on your knees, and I'm going to tell you, when I said the third step prayer, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me, that thou will release me from the bondage of self. I realized this is a sacrifice. And I so desperately wanted to give everything that I had away because I hated it all. And it was for other people. And I had no expectations. I just started working this program. So the victory over them may bear witness to those and others that I may serve. That power, that love, and that way of life. And I just started working with people in the penitentiary. And I started rebuilding my relationship with my mother, because my mother's love is unconditional. It is something that it blows me smooth away. She still loved me. Tip, on the other hand, I didn't talk to him for 2 years. And on Christmas Day 2015, I got on the phone with him because he was at my parents' house, and we talked for a little while, and I called back later that night. My mom was crying, and she said, you need to talk to Tip. And Tip said, there's something different. I don't know what it is, but there's something different with you. And he said, I want you to come home. And right then in that moment, I felt grace just pour over me, because I didn't deserve that. I didn't deserve forgiveness. I didn't deserve any of that. And I had just been forgiven by somebody, and they taught me that I didn't have to carry that burden anymore. That was God's burden to carry. I didn't have to worry about my reputation. That was all taken care of. All of that was gone. I don't have to worry about the guilt and shame anymore. I just owed it to other people what had freely been given me. Because at that time, I didn't crave alcohol or drugs anymore. And I was just walking this program and working with people in the penitentiary. And so I did. And I did it. And I honestly didn't think I was going to make my first parole. In fact, I was kind of scared to come back into society. I was doing what I was doing in there, and I was growing, and I was seeing incredible things happen in there. I saw people's lives come back together in there. I saw the state of Texas take away kids' rights from their parents, and God restore them, because God doesn't give a hoot about man-made legislation. Because they worked this program and they developed a relationship with God. They'd come to me and they would say, I'm getting my rights terminated, Gabe, because I worked in the law library. And they're like, what do I do? And I said, you need to get right with God. God's your attorney now. And they got right with God, and miracles just started showering down, and relationships started getting restored. And they're like, I'm a believer, because only God can do this. Only God can do this. Get right with God. All of a sudden, miracles started happening in my life. Every locked door I came across opened up. I walked to any place on these units I wanted to go to, and I got to spread the word and carry this message with me in all my affairs. I did my inventory, which I'd done 1,000 times. I got on when I said this, I confessed it, and I realized that this confession was so important to me, because I'm just getting all of this stuff out there because I want God to put light on it. 6 and 7, I realized that the stuff I thought was good was horrible. Take all of it, please. Burn the ships. I serve you. It's your freedom. I was more free in the penitentiary than I was outside. 7 and 8. 8 and 9. Made my list of amends. What do you do at that point? I've said sorry 1,000 times. Man, that road of reconstruction is long and dark and arduous. What do? I just started working with people and living this thing out. And slowly people started coming back into my life. God started working and doing the things that I couldn't do for myself. And I made my first parole. I made my first parole, and I got out. And I came home. And I just started throwing myself into this program and working with other people. And I started putting lights on a stick for $10 an hour at my old sponsor's work. Works for an LED company. I oversee compliance there now. And when I started walking these steps and coming back to St. Angela Solution Group, my sister had been estranged from me because I nearly killed her mother. And I'd written her a letter, an apology letter, but the amount of times I said sorry to her, as I mentioned, it just wasn't enough. So I gave that to God, just like I did everything else. And also, too, I asked, how do I make amends to my ex-girlfriend if I can't talk to her? And they said, well, you've got a whole lot of hate in your heart, Lord. There's a lot of pain in there. I'm going to tell you how to do it. This was in prison. So if you're going to get on your knees and you're going to pray great things and blessings over her life, and that a good man that's not you come into it. Okay. I didn't mean that prayer the first 150 times I said it, maybe 200 times. But guys, one day I did start meaning it. One day I was on my knees and I meant it, and I meant every word of it, and I realized I'd forgiven that person. And God had, in that moment, taught me what love really was. If I loved her, I was going to let her go. If I loved her, I wanted good things to happen to her. If I loved her, she was going to have a good man in her life, and I wasn't that because I was sick and in the penitentiary. That's what love is. And it was this love that these people came in and they were showing me. And then I started to realize, because I'm living with these other people that are black, white, Mexican, all different kinds of races and nationalities, and I had all these conditioning things in my life. And I'm going to tell you guys, these guys that came in and worked with me, they didn't ask me who I voted for. They didn't ask me where I came from. They didn't ask me what I believed in. They just knew my life was on fire, and they came in there and they showed me the love of God, and they saved my life because nobody else was talking to me. All my friends poofed and vanished, except for the ones in AA, and they stayed in touch with me in my family group, in my home group. And that's what I do today, because I get caught up in news, I get caught up in the material things that are going on today. But when I get to go work with an alcoholic, all that stuff just kind of comes crashing down, doesn't it? When I'm working with an alcoholic, I don't ask them where they came from or what they voted for or any of those things that they didn't ask me. I just work with someone whose life is on fire, and that is the most freeing and magical moment of my life. That is where the magic and the rubber hits the ground. And when I do that, I get to realize all the things that I did that day that I probably ought to put in my inventory and talk to my sponsor about, and the amends that I need to go make, because I don't do it perfectly either. And then I also realized that all those things that I was angry about and all the news and all that stuff's man-made. Every bit of that trash is man-made. Every single one of these problems are man-made. And I'm just sitting here with somebody, and it's that raw emotion that I felt when I was at my rock bottom. It's that raw place where that loneliness and that pain is and that beauty is, where it's just God and me and another person in that room. And I get to let God use me as a vessel. It says on the top of page 77, our real purpose is to be a maximum service to God and the people about me. That is my purpose. Yes, I have a job, and I use that to put food on the table. When I want to go to the big events in town and my sponsee calls me, those people out there, most of them don't get this, guys. They're going to go to the big events. They're going to go see the glamour and all that other stuff. We're going to go serve the kingdom of God. We're going to go make some real difference in this world. We're going to go show somebody some love. We're going to go show someone some freedom and some way out. That's how we fight back, because this place is plenty corrupt and crazy and nuts and full of hatred. And the only way I fight back is one person at a time, and it's through love. And I get to do that every single day through this program. And that gets me up in the morning, and it lets me go to bed at night with peace in my heart. And it gave me a purpose I was looking for all those years in those bottles of alcohol. And it was what I was looking for, having those drunk discussions late at night about the ruins and the woes of the world. Well, then get up and do something about it. Pick up your mat and walk, Gabe. And today I get to pick up my mat and walk. I get to go be of service and not take from people anymore. I get to go give. I get to be part of the solution and not the problem. To be part of the harmony and not the chaos. That is magical. Today I get to go anywhere a free man goes. Anywhere, provided I have a good reason. And I do. I'm around alcohol all the time. We wine and dine customers. Now, I don't stay out till 2 in the morning like some of our guys that are getting loaded with them are. But it doesn't bother me. My parents drink. My sister drinks. I'm around it. Now, I don't go hang out at the bars because I don't have any business being there. I can't. If I have a reason to be there and I can be of service to somebody, then there's a good reason for me to be there. But here's the most important thing too. I get to go all those places, a free man. We get to go places where other people can't. We get to go into the prisons We get to go into the jails. We get to go into the hospitals. We get to go into the institutions, and those doors swing wide open for us. Because we get to be the hands and feet of God. I told you, I fully believe that everyone in this room is called to a higher purpose. And we get to go be that. We get to go sow peace in a society that is crumbling right now. We get to go be the salt that preserves it. That's incredible. That gets me up in the morning. That lights my fire. That makes me thank God. Thank you for everything that I have been through. Guys, this is God's story, not mine. It's God's car. It's God's money. It's God's job. And as long as I keep that mentality and put God first, all this other stuff just kind of naturally works itself out. I found out a little under a year ago that they changed the law in the state of Texas, and I was able to sit for the bar exam. Now, we had a whole lot of obstacles to go through, and I did. I sat for the bar exam, and I passed it. And, of course, I still had this felony and everything else, and so we had to go through the hoops there. Well, a whole bunch of people wrote some really amazing letters on my behalf, and they submitted them, and they did something that was out of the ordinary. And the State Bar of Texas had an informal meeting with me about 3 weeks ago, and they licensed me yesterday. Thank you. And I didn't ever expect that to happen. There was never an expectation. It just did. There wasn't an expectation of being forgiven by tip. There wasn't an expectation of being made free by parole. There wasn't an expectation of that. And I just told God, if you seem fit to give me a license, it's your license. And it will always be your license, and I will use it for your purpose. And most importantly, my sister, who has a solid walk with God, but I hurt her so bad for what I did to her mom. A year after I got out of the penitentiary, she sent me this letter. It says, "Dear Gabe, over a year ago, you wrote to me asking me for forgiveness. You finally put into words what I'd longed to hear, and I was so grateful. Yet even though my gratefulness, I didn't respond. I did forgive you, and I do forgive you, but at the time, it was still so much more of a process for me. I was in the process of forgiving you, even though I woke daily declaring forgiveness and blessings. I don't know why it has taken me so long to respond. Part of it sheer laziness, as the art of letter writing seems to have been lost, and part of it fear and stirred up feelings I was afraid were still there. Anger, doubt, hurt, which would tell me I hadn't forgiven. And part of it disobedience to God for true unknowns. Either way, I sit here this morning with no stirred up feelings other than love. I was so grateful to have you back. It's been so long, much longer than that physical prison sentence, and I do forgive. And I ask you to please forgive me for taking so long, for being so slow, for being so unforgiving and unloving, for not being there for you. Jesus showed me a side of me that I didn't care for, and I struggled madly with it, but today I walk free. I love you. I'm proud of you. I forgive you. I forgive myself. I desire for us to start anew as brother and sister, to get to know each other, to be a support for each other, to be a listening ear for each other. You are my only brother, and I love you so much, and I'm glad that you are mine. I love you, Christian." That's the power of God. That's the power of restoration and reconciliation that only God has. That's the power of this program, and not having expectations and just going and serving God and washing feet. And for once in my life, it wasn't about what I could get from other people. God just does that, and He shows up, and I can't even express how amazing it is in words. He just shows up in miraculous ways and just blows us smooth away, just rocks us into the fourth dimension of existence. And it changes this. Tears it down, and it makes me realize that all that stuff that was so horrible and so awful, I don't have to carry that. That's His. And He fights those battles, and He won that battle when I walked into the Board of Law Examiners. That battle was already won. But we have to make a decision. And I wake up every single morning and make that decision, and by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll find myself full up in my ego in a battle, some sort of power struggle with our CFO or somebody else. And I'll remember maybe I need to step back and work this program and talk to my sponsor, or Brian, who was my old sponsor, who's in the program, and they can check me. And maybe I just need to have a little bit more humility and let that power struggle collapse and go be of service to somebody. What can I do? Because me fighting somebody, or whatever the case may be that day, what my ego gets me into, that's painful. That suffering I don't want anymore. And by the grace of God in this program, I know where to go and what to do to bring me back to that peace and that happiness. I am so grateful to be part of this family. I wake up every morning blessed that I'm one of you guys. And then I get to go serve other people. And guys, we get to be the hands and feet. More than that, we get to be the testimonies of God. Because everybody saw everyone in this room and they knew that we were lost. We were goners. They tried everything. Our loved ones, our family tried everything. And to no avail. But God showed up. And God's in the business of confounding the wise and using the foolish to do it. And that's what He delights in. Thank y'all so much for having me. It's been an honor and a blessing to be here.
Thank you.